All right, so we're going to do a live troubleshooting. Well, it's not really live, but we're going to do a recorded troubleshooting session. So we have a client who has a Express application, wasn't written by us, but it's an Express application, talks to a database, and it's been handed over to us. But we don't have any local development setup. So when we inherited the project, there was no local way to like boot up the application locally on your machine and have it connect to a local database for testing and debugging purposes. So that's actually what I'm working on right here at the moment. So I'm going to see if I can make this work and talk through some of the things, and hopefully this will be, an educative thing for you. So I've kind of went through and just made sure that there's no sensitive information that's going to be displayed on the screen. So here's the long of it. We have a Docker Compose file that I've created, which this is going to tell Docker what container to create and manage for us. And so we're creating a Postgres database container with the Postgres 9.5 image, which lines up with the correct database version that is expected. And then we're setting some environment variables. So for the local database, we're going to use Postgres user with a password. I know that's not secure, but this is just for local development. We just want to see this work. And then a Postgres database called cell helmet. So we have this Docker Compose file. And then over here in the terminal, essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the command to boot up that Docker container using Docker Compose. So that's going to be Docker Compose up, and then we're going to run it in detached mode, which means that I can still work within this terminal without needing to close it. And if I close the terminal, it'll kill the process. So I'll kind of demonstrate that real quick, right? So I'll run Docker Compose up. And what we'll see is it should attempt to boot up the Docker container. Yep, and you can see it's attaching the container and it's doing its thing. Now, if I close this, and here I'll open up Docker Desktop real quick, you'll see we have this container for registration backend. We have this Postgres container. If I actually cancel this on the terminal here, I'll cancel this process. We should see that the Docker container is no longer running, right? So you can see it's been exited, okay? So if we run it in detached mode, this is gonna just allow that container to be up and running, and I can close my terminal whenever I want. So we'll run Docker Compose up, detached mode. Okay, cool. So it's up and running. So we have a self-hosted local Postgres database, okay? Now what we want to do is we want to make sure that the Express application can actually talk to it. So I'm learning as I go. Again, I didn't write this application. This was kind of given to us and we decided to take it on, and I'm trying to figure it out just like everybody else. So we're going to close that out. So we created a README here. There wasn't even a README file, which is a big no-no. There's no documentation. So we started to create some documentation. But the long story is that there is a series of scripts in the package.json. So this application is a Node.js application. It's using express.js. And so we have a couple scripts here, which is going to start the application for local development. So over in my terminal, I'm going to run that yarn start local, and this is going to boot up the Express application using something called PM2. I'm not a PM2 expert. I've seen it before out in the wild over the last 13 years, but my understanding of it is this is going to serve up the application. And so one way I can test if this application is reachable is by looking at the Express app, and I can look at basically like any endpoint, and then I can pick one of those endpoints and I can dial it up in Postman. So I've already written a Postman, and I don't know why this is taking so long to boot up, but okay, so we have Postman, and we're just going to toss in like any random PIN number, and we're going to check this PIN code here. So this is one of the Express endpoints. And so if I send, actually, wait, I'm sorry. I want to tail the logs of the Express app. So we're going to do that now. So I'm going to do yarn logs, which is going to essentially print out all of the PM2 logs for that Express application. So it looks like there's a couple errors, server JS 127. So we're going to look at that. Minimize. Server.js 147. So this is where we're configuring our PG client. So this is the Postgres client, which is allowing the application to communicate with the database. So this matches our Docker Compose YAML configuration here. So that matches this. And let's see here. So await. That's an old error. So I think we're good there. So what we see is the app is running on port 40, which is great. I should be able to access that in Postman. So if I just like hit an endpoint with a GET request, you'll see it's sending a request, and then we'll see over here the application logged user requesting pin at get check pin. But you'll notice this is hanging, and that's not a good sign. The way the HTTP request response should work is like you should send the request and it should return a response back in like at least under a couple seconds. So something isn't working here. My suspicion is that the PG client isn't actually fully connected to the database. So let's figure out that. So we're going to open this up, and so all this stuff lines up, and I've added some code here where it says client.connect, and my thought here is that when the connection is completed, we should get a console log. So we need to figure out why this is not actually connected. So one thing we can do is, let's see, process exited with code 1, app running on port 40, user requested check pin. If I go back over to Postman, if I cancel that, we'll get the GET request was like canceled after no milliseconds. So let's go to check pin. So let's search check pin, and so here we are, check pin. It's going to be a request response, and we're getting the .pin from the query, which is here, this pin right here, and it does console log user requested pin at get check pin plus pin. And we saw that in our terminal, so we know that that code is executing. It's this client.query which just kind of seems to hang. So let's do a test. Let's just send a response back of true, and we'll save the file, and we'll just kind of see what happens if I hit that Postman request again. So it appears to still just be hanging. I wonder if it's because I need to recompile the Express app. So what I'm going to do in this terminal is I'm going to run yarn stop local, which is going to stop that PM2 service, and then I'm going to yarn start local. Okay, so now we're reserving the application. It should be the latest and greatest code. I'm going to try to send this Postman request again. Okay, so what I just did there is I kind of did a little trick, and I tested that, like, is client.query hanging, and it appears that it is hanging. So I wonder if it's maybe just like our Docker container like isn't really reachable. We should try and figure out why that is. So I'm going to delete this because we don't want to force a status code of 200 back, which is what we got here. It says status 200 OK in Postman. It returned true. So that code worked. So we're verifying that that client.query is just kind of hanging, and I don't exactly know why. We need to figure that out. So let's do this. We're going to delete this, and we're going to actually take this. This is where ChatGPT is actually like super helpful. So let's open up ChatGPT real quick, and we're going to go to ChatGPT, OpenAI, and we're going to use GPT model 4, and we're going to give it some context. So I have an express.js app. It uses the npm package PG. The database is Postgres. The database is locally hosted using Docker Compose. Postgres version 9.5. Oh, hold on, my wife is calling me. Yes, honey. Do I have a hat? Yeah, I do have a hat. Do you need a hat? Yeah. Yeah, with me? Yeah, sure. Okay, what kind of hat? Any hat? Just a hat. Okay, well, I have a hat for you. Okay, all right, bye. Apparently, my wife needs a hat. So, anyways, the database is hosted locally using Docker Compose, Postgres version 9.5. And I'll even paste in some code. So basically, I'll say like, look, like this client.query is hanging. So this client.query is hanging and never returns a response. How can I check that the client.connect is a success prior to executing the query? My apologies for my typing skills and spelling skills are actually terrible, which is not like the best for being a software developer, but I've gotten by. Let's see. Let's paste in that code. Okay, let's see what ChatGPT says. Oh no, they disabled browse with Bing. That's too bad. I really like that feature. I had some content coming out about that. So, all right, so you can check whether client connect method was success by using callback or promises. So this is what I already have. Let's see here. How do I here? Let me stop the response. We're gonna go to the Docker Compose YAML file, and we're gonna ask ChatGPT around this. So here is my Docker Compose file. How do I connect to the database using PSQL? I think it is. Okay. So yep, you can connect using the pSQL utility. So yep, I know I have pSQL. I can test that here in this terminal by just typing pSQL. Yep, so it's installed. I have it. So let's see here, localhost. So let's see, if I copy this command here, can I connect to the instance? Password. Oh, port 5432 failed. Failed. Password authentication failed for user Postgres. Okay, let's try again. What is my password? Postgres password. Postgres password. Password authentication failed for Postgres. I'm going to ask ChatGPT about that. When I attempt to use pSQL, I get the following. I entered password for password prompt, and I know that this is set in the Docker Compose YAML file. So this is interesting. It's saying that it can't connect because the password is incorrect. However, we've set the password. So let's see here. Double check the password in your Docker Compose YAML file. If it's not password, you should update it to match the password using the pSQL command. So, okay. Let's do this. Let's do a fresh Docker instance. So we're going to stop the service. We're going to delete the container. We're going to remove it. We're going to delete the associated image. And we're going to delete the associated volume. So there's no Docker resources at this stage. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to recreate those Docker resources with those environment variables. So let's try it. So Docker Compose up D. Okay, so it's pulling down the image. And again, like if I look at this Docker Compose file here, it's saying the user is Postgres, the password is password, and the database is cell helmet, is what the database is called. So now I should have a Docker container running, and I do. Okay, and now I'm going to attempt that psql command again, and I'm going to double check it. So psql host localhost, user is Postgres, database is cell helmet, port is 5432. It's going to prompt me for a password. Password is password. Hey, we're in. Look at that. Okay, so that's great. So we have a database. It's hosted with Docker locally. It's accessible using those credentials. Why can't the application reach it? So I'm actually going to quit this. Get out of there. I don't need to be in that Postgres shell. So, okay, let's see what happens. Oh, real quick. Hey, honey, you said you needed the hat? Here, come get it. Just make sure you close the door on the way out, okay? All right, thank you. It's my wife and my son, Nolan. Yeah, I wonder what she needs a hat for. That's interesting. So, okay, let's see here. So we have the Express app served on port 80. I wonder if we can go, hold on, into the browser real quick. Can I reach this if I go to localhost port 80? Okay, so it is serving. The web application is served. That's great. So let's close out of there. Now, let's see. Another thing to consider is if you have another instance of Postgres. I don't have another instance of Postgres. So do I just not know something about Express? Now, granted, this is how it was when it was handed to me. I've just added some code to basically try to troubleshoot, like, why is it not connecting? I don't know. Let's save the file to get rid of that return statement, and let's hit Postman again. Send. I have to recompile PM2. How do I do that? How do I make it so that PM2, using PM2, how can I reload the Express app without stopping and starting the PM2 service? Is there like a command I can use instead? So is a powerful tool. Yeah, PM2's reload command with 0 time downtime. PM2 reload. Okay, so let's try that. PM2 reload, and I think it's called reg server. Okay, PM2 reload reg server. That's great. I'm thinking, and we're off in wild land here, but I'm thinking it would be great to tie that command to like a hook or something where I save the file and it will automatically do that. I don't know why that wasn't something that was originally done, because it's extremely painful to like write code, save the file, then have to like stop PM2, then start it again. So just, this is how we think as senior devs, right? We look at like, there's too much friction in this process. Like, even though I'm trying to solve this problem here, can I reduce some of the friction along the way? So that's kind of what I'm thinking through, and hopefully you're going to absorb some of this and find it useful. Okay, so we've reloaded the server. We're going to go over to Postman real quick, and we're going to try this request again. And we're sending the request, and the request is still just hanging. It's very interesting. So let's see here. Client.query. There's got to be something wrong with the client. There's got to be something wrong with this client here. Client, Postgres, localhost, cell helmet. I wonder if it doesn't know what localhost is. I wonder if I change this to 127.0.0.1. So typically, localhost is referring to this IP address, usually. Sometimes things just know what localhost is and where that resolves, but sometimes it doesn't. And so I wonder if that might be the issue, is that it doesn't know. So I'm going to reload Reload the server, and app is running on port 80. Still not getting anything on client connect. I don't know if it's like our syntax is off. Let's try that. Reload. Yeah, still nothing. Like if I just console log here, right? Like console log something, save it, reload PM2, you'll see something is logged here, right? So process exited with code 1, SIGINT closed PG client. So why is PG client getting SIGINT? Let's check that. Let's ask ChatGPT what it thinks. So here is some code in my express server.js file. This is right under the client.connect statement. Looking at the PM2 logs, it appears SIGINT is thrown and client.end is called. How can I check why SIGINT is called, preventing client.connect from finishing? Again, if you don't use ChatGPT, if you don't have a paid ChatGPT account, I mean, why? Like, go pay the $20 a month and get it. The reason being is without this, you're left to Google searches, you're left to Stack Overflow. This is augmenting me right now, right? Like, this is helping me get things more done. It's giving me information. Now, granted, it might mislead me from time to time, but at least I'm not searching through Stack Overflow posts and like Google searches trying to figure out like why the hell this thing doesn't work. So let's see what it has to say. So SIGINT is typically fired when user interrupts processes such as pressing Control-C. Well, I didn't. SIGINT and SIGTERM, PM2 stop app name, restart, yada, yada. However, in your case, SIGINT appears to be fired just after the client connect statement, which is unusual unless you're manually stopping. You can check why SIGINT is called by doing the following. Check the PM2 logs. Okay, stopping reg app server, process exit with code 1, something. Error handling. Check if your database is available. As you connect to the database, check if your database is available and running. Okay, let's do this instead. Let's look at what is the version of PG that we have installed. PG, where are you? PG 7.6. Let's look at the PG docs for 7.6. So PG 7.6. Let's do npm PG 7.6. PG npm. Okay. 7.6.0. Cool. 7.6.0. So it's old, although it was last published 11 days ago. So let's see here. Support, blah, blah, blah. Where's the docs? Documentation. PG client. Client, PG client, host, port, database, user, password. So maybe there's some missing information. Let's try to line it up. So host, port, let's see. Host, port is going to be 5432, I think. Yep, 5432. And let's double check here. Host, port, database, user, password. That's what we have. Host, user, port, database, password. Okay, let's reload PM2. we should see this connected successfully. That's the thing, is like connect is a method, it's a promise. It's a JavaScript promise, which means it's asynchronous, which means when connect finishes, dot then should execute, and it appears like it's just not at all. Client query. We're gonna delete this client query. Delete this. Let's reload it again. This project kill something running. Okay, close PG client. What do we get? What do we get with PG client? New client, client connect. Client connect. Query config. Client.query. Result await client query. Now this is awaited in this example. In my code, it's not awaited, and I'm wondering why. Maybe that's the issue, is that the Express application runs, it's served, but maybe we're not properly awaiting client connect. So let's do this. We're gonna actually comment out all of this, and we're gonna console log client.connect. We're gonna reload PM2 and see what we get. So we get promise pending. Okay. So let's see if we can get this to be async. Now, granted, this entire Express app, it doesn't look like it's async out of the box. So I guess what we can do is maybe write a new asynchronous function and execute it. Like, it feels weird, but okay, const connect to DB is async. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. Also, if you're not using GitHub Copilot, you probably should, because again, this right here, look, it's suggesting the code for me, and looking at it, I think that should suffice. So I'll hit tab to take it. And we're just going to execute connect to DB. See if that does it. So hit save or reload. Nope, still nothing. Nothing. There's not even errors being thrown. There's no client connect error. It's just client.connect seems to hang indefinitely. So here is some updated code. .connect seems to hang forever. Error is never thrown. To PM2 logs. Server is definitely not down. We can try this connection timeout milliseconds. Yeah, it's troubling that we're not even getting a error. Okay, now we're getting an error. It says timeout expired. Error connecting to database error. Timeout expired. So something's happening where this app is not able to reach that Docker database, and we have the ports mapped. So in Docker, we're basically mapping like the port of that Docker image and container to the host, which is like my my desktop computer. We are able to connect to it using that psql command. So what could it be? I mean, at this stage, it's almost just like this client isn't able to actually like interact with the Docker image, which is just weird. So weird. All right, let's see. I guess we can switch this back to localhost because it wasn't working before. Couldn't hurt to leave the port there. That's fine. So this makes this an asynchronous process that's awaited, but it's awaited for more than 5 seconds. It should not take 5 seconds to connect. So let's see here. I can connect to the database using psql command you provided previously. That worked well, but for some reason the code I pasted above did finally throw an error after 5 seconds. Still cannot get a response from .connect. Let's see what it has to say. Yeah, it could be an issue with the PG module. Man, wouldn't that be crazy if that's all it was? It's just PG, like that version of PG is just wrong. Let's look at the docs, I guess. Maybe we should just update the PG client, just see if that fixes it. So we are in Node.js application land. You know, if you have a Node.js app, it's like here's your app, and like here's actually the code that you write, and like everything else is dependencies. And so I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna uninstall PG. We're gonna pin this dependency here so that this stays at 4.16, and then we're gonna actually stop. We're gonna do this. We're going to yarn install. We're gonna reinstall the node modules. Package.json. Yeah, that's the other thing too, is they were using npm, like the previous developers were using npm. I've decided to use yarn. I think yarn is better, it's faster. So package.json, package lock. We're gonna delete this package.lock file. We don't need it. We need the yarn lock file. Okay, cool. So we've updated the dependencies. Actually, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna completely blow away the node modules folder altogether. We're just gonna delete all of the node modules that were installed. And we're gonna retry yarn install. Reinstall all of the node modules from scratch. And then the second step that we're gonna do is we're gonna add that PG package. So we're gonna go yarn add PG. Let's see. Okay, so it's installed PG. If we go to package.json, what do we see? We see PG at 8.11. So now this require PG is now using 8.11, which I'm guessing is the current. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna reload. We're gonna reload. Oh, look at this. Connected successfully. Would you look at that? So all this and what it's looking like is it's looking like that version of PG, the PG client, the PostgreSQL client, is bunk for whatever reason. Now maybe it worked for them. It could be my current node version, which is something to check as well. So I'm gonna actually do that. So I'm gonna do nvm current. So current version of Node is 16.3.1. I'm assuming that the version of Node that they wrote this application on was less than 16.13.1, and maybe that's why it worked for them and this no longer works. Like maybe 16 introduced a breaking change for that version of PG. So there's that, right? This is software development. This is how it looks. This is how it feels on the day-to-day. You know, it is what it is. You're going to run into things like this, especially when you're trying to help folks who have older tech, who have older software that, they just can't afford to rewrite it all, right? So let's look at this error code. Let's see. Error, password authentication failed for user postgres. Okay. Password authentication failed, all failed. And then it says connect successfully. So let's do this. Let's look at the Docker compose element, password, postgres, okay. And so it should just work now. I still want to replace this to what it was. Now, granted, I think having it async is correct, but I don't want to disturb too much of what was previously there. So I'm going to hit save on that. Oh. Reload PG. There we go. Connected successfully. Wonderful. And then you'll see our query here, this console log return client query, that it did return the query from the database, which is great. So we've fixed it. Like, the app is now able to connect to the database, which is wonderful. So we've accomplished our goal. So let's just take a step back and like, what was the thought process here? Well, we knew we had an Express app. We knew that Express application is written in Node.js, right? We knew that there's a Postgres database. We knew that we created a Postgres database using Docker locally on our machine so that we can set up some sort of a local dev environment. And we also knew that these two things are not able to talk to each other. And everything looks right, right? Code looks right, Docker compose YAML looks right. I'm able to connect to it, and it's a dependency issue. It's just an issue with that package, PG, that was previously installed versus my Node version. I'm almost certain that that's what the problem was, and now it works. So that's great. So this is how it looks being a software developer. So if you're interested in being a software developer, please consider following me, drop a comment, like, whatever, subscribe. I can teach you how to think like this. I can teach you how to troubleshoot these type of issues. Now, granted, I got 13 years of experience under my belt, so I have an advantage, but you also have ChatGPT. You also have GitHub Copilot. You can be augmented, and you can shorten that learning curve. So anyways, thanks for following along with me. Hope it was fun. Hope it was entertaining. And yeah, maybe until next time.